Welcome to the Know Yourself Revolution podcast. My name is Grace Gravestock, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Sarah Doyle, who is the founder for Coach for Success. We are going to be talking about living a fearless life. So let me tell you a little bit about Sarah, and then we'll get a chance to hear from her. Sarah and I have so much in common. Oh my gosh, we were chatting before the show. She's a seasoned communication professional, certified leadership coach, training facilitator, and workplace culture consultant. Over 2 decades of leadership experience in PR and communications. She's led corporate communication, issue management, crisis, PR, crisis communication teams, and her career also spans public, private, and post-secondary sectors. With a passion for leadership development and professional coaching, she stepped out of the corporate environment and into entrepreneurship last year. She's the founder of Coach for Success, a professional coaching, culture, and communication consultancy. She works with mid-level leaders on the way to becoming senior executives and mid-career professional women inspired to reach their next level. She has a BA honors degree, a diploma in PR and communication, and certificates in leadership coaching, neuro-linguistic programming coaching, timeline therapy, and breathwork coaching. I love it. She's a mix of the woo and the corporate, just like me. She's a passionate advocate for mental health, inclusivity, and uplifting women in leadership. I'm excited to have you on the show. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Grace. It's just absolutely wonderful to be here.
Awesome. Today, we're going to be talking about living a fearless life, and her mission is to create healthy and vibrant workplaces where creativity, innovation, and collaboration thrive. So, as if you've watched one of our other episodes, we always start with a reading of her actual life purpose in her chart. So let's find out who Sarah is meant to be. And you can see that she is here. She's being and doing exactly what she's here to be and do. And the reason that I like to start these interviews with a chart reading is because I want you to know that you also have a purpose. And if you don't know what it is, you can get your free chart and find out what work you're here for at whatsmychart.com. So we use the basis of human design without jargon. And we're looking at Sarah's chart. And the purpose of this is not to make you feel like you need to learn how to read this, but simply to give you data points to see that everything is in your chart. And so when we're looking at Sarah's chart, what I'm noticing, oh my gosh, look at all the color. Okay, what does that mean? At a high level, that means that Sarah is here to make an impact. And she's here on so many levels, gosh. And so let's talk about some of those things. So when we look at the chart, we're looking at 9 energy centers. The things that are colored in are the things that are what she's here to master. And the things that are white, or what we call open, are the things she is here to learn about through relationships. And the same is true for you. And so if you have something going on in your life and you're like wondering, why do I keep seeing this pattern over and over? It's probably one of these white parts of your chart. It's probably that one of the things that you're here to become wise about, or it could be something that you're here to master, because through repetition, you can become masterful at these things. Wow, Sarah. Sarah is a professional. Her professional type is an express builder. Like me, you are here to find shortcuts, to offer shortcuts to people. And I know you do. And I can't wait to talk about NLP and timeline therapy and how that was part of your breakthrough in your life. Let's see, what else can we say? One of the things that jumps out at me right away about Sarah's chart is that she has got a lot of motor power. What you notice is these four energy centers at the bottom right, 3 out of 4 are colored in. Those are motors. So Sarah, you have the orange one is the motor. That means you have the access to the Energizer Bunny battery. It means that when you're doing work that you find satisfying, and this applies to you too, if you're looking at your chart right now and you're wondering what it means, if you have that one colored in, it means that one of your superpowers is that you will have endless energy for the work that you find satisfying. And I say work in air quotes because it doesn't necessarily mean things that you're being paid for right now, but it means the kind of thing that if we were to talk at 2:00 in the morning and I was to call you up and I'd be like, Sarah, what are you still doing at 2:00 in the morning? We have this thing to go to tomorrow. So for you, Sarah, what might one of those things be?
Oh, absolutely. I get in trouble at home all the time for hyper focusing. And a great example would be when I was so excited to launch my business, Grace, that I felt I needed to have this website created in order for people to know who I am and see my services and my offers so that I could actually give back. And no one was paying me to build this, but I took a month and I set a deadline for myself. And I was so hyper focused. I was staying at my computer, in some ways having old patterns and bad habits emerge for me just to get this finished because I was so focused and it meant so much to me. And for me, it was the unofficial launch to becoming a coach. So that would be an example of where I just found the extra energy and I put it in. And someone in my family said, "You know that this isn't a real deadline. This is self imposed, right?"
So the way I would, yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sarah. So the way I would interpret that by looking at your chart is notice that Sarah's public role is a problem solver and a specialist. So that one line is about being a researcher and being dedicated to the details. And so that sounds like that website for you was a lot of details that were really important and making sure you get that right. And so that can actually show up, that story that you told can actually show up in a lot of ways in your chart. But one of the other things is that jumps out at me is that in the public role, it says problem solver. You, Sarah, are besides being a problem solver, which I also am. So I have a 5-line in my public profile. And that means that we are also generals in time of trouble. So it means that it's the reason why, and you and I have this in common. That's why I'm going to say it. We get called in. I know you get called in for crisis kinds of situations for PR and communications. And I have always been called in for change projects, large scale change projects when there's a problem and it's a change and nobody likes change. So they call me in and then they use me while there's trouble. And then they're done with me, like they let me go. And so earlier in my career, I thought maybe there was something wrong with me. Why did I get pushed off the project? And when I learned about my human design, I realized it's because I'm a general in time of trouble, as are you. And so this is the reason why we're called as problem solvers to solve the problem at hand. But then when we're done, like they don't really need us anymore. So does that make sense to your experience?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if you actually knew me outside of this interview, like you couldn't say anything more true. One of the things that I've always found is that I really enjoy jumping into situations where there's a particular challenge that an organization needs to overcome. And I come in, I do lots of strategy, lots of problem solving, trying to get down to the root cause, what's going on here, figuring out the way out of trouble. So in PR and communications office, it's crisis management or reputation management. And then what I find is that after that, they reach a point of stability, I'm bored. I'm ready to move on. And so in my career, this was always a pattern. I was hopping around a lot. And at first, there were some people that looked at that negatively, but I just found, no, this is true to myself. I'm bored now. There's no more challenge here. I need to go. They don't need me anymore.
And that's totally true. And so that is that 5-line energy, problem solver, general in time of trouble. You're also a visionary leader. So that's another interpretation of this particular energy pattern. And know that all of these are energy patterns, they're archetypes. So one of the other things that jumps out at me is it says channels here, and you've got a long list. Like that's a lot for most people compared to most charts. And I've done thousands of charts now.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, you've got a lot of gifts. Each of those are the summary version is each of those are very special gifts that you're here to master. So it's a lot of them. I mentioned a lot of color. And so when we look at the big picture of your chart, what it says is a person who gets inspiration from, I'm going to say, beyond the physical realm. And I know that's a little woo for some of our audience, but when we get into your story, I think that will make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
And if we follow the color, you see everybody, even though most people don't understand how to read the chart, that's okay. But the color here in the mind area, it means that you have a consistent way of looking at the world. And that helps you when you're a consultant, right? Because you can follow this structured process and you can fit the crisis at hand into the models to be able to handle it. And so that lends itself to that. And then you see the color that goes straight into your throat. It means you're here to speak your mind, like literally 2 lines. That means it's a lot of ability to articulate your thoughts and put them into words. And then if we follow the color, which is the energy, we're following the energy patterns here. What we see is that color in your throat, that blue square, goes all the way to the yellow on the right hand side, and that's your emotions. And so the fact is, you are here to speak about what you're passionate about. That's what that connection is. And if we look at the other thing that your throat is connected to, it's that green one in the middle. That is called your G center. It's your geospatial. It's like your own internal GPS that lives in your heart. It's literally called the magnetic monopole. And you are here to speak your truth. That's your own sense of your self-love. And all of these numbers that are related to that particular part are related to different types of love. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of love that you're here to master. And that's powerful. And the fact that you've got, I just have to say it, this motor, this green one, the little triangle, it means that you've always been strong-willed. And when you are determined to do something, nothing's going to get in your way. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I think that's very true. Yeah.
Yes. And if we follow the color from that yellow on the left-hand side to the green, and then we follow it up to the throat, most of that is colored in, which is the channel. I call it the entrepreneur's channel. But it's interesting. And I mention it because you went from corporate to having your own thing, your own business, and your own consultancy. And so what that says is you are hardwired to have an easier time in some ways than me. For instance, I don't have that hardwiring. For me, that's all white, that part of it. And so the fact that you have both of those, you have all of that, is really in your favor. Now, it doesn't mean that if you, like, I don't have it, doesn't mean I can't have a business, but I just want to give you acknowledgement and recognition that is going to serve you. That little green triangle, it's only 1 out of 8 people that have that. And it means you have access to resources. And so you're going to have an easier time attracting money and resources throughout your life. And you have different lessons. You're here to master that. Whereas by contrast, me or somebody who has it open is here. One of the lessons is about your own value. So for you, it could still be part of your lessons, but for you, it's about mastering that sense of your own internal value that you already have a sense for, because it's consistent for you. Whereas anything that's white in the chart means it's inconsistent. So it means you're going to be learning about it through relationships. So for example, the top one and the bottom one, these energy centers in your chart are white. What does that mean? It means both are pressure centers, but you're going to learn about pressure through relationships. And you potential to burn out with it. And this is, and I'm tying this, I know it's part of your story and we're going to get to it, but I just want you to see that you're perfectly designed to be and do what you came here to be and do if you're watching this. And I want Sarah, you to know that you are, of course, this is true for you too. And what we see is this bottom square is the center for adrenals and stress. And so if you don't take care of yourself, it's a lesson in this life. We're looking at the Cliff Notes for your life lessons. And this lesson is about burnout. And so I know that you went through burnout and you're going to tell your story in a minute. And look at all the color again, powerful. You're here to have an impact. And you certainly have with your corporate work, and you certainly are with your own consultancy. There's one more thing I want to talk about, which is your grand purpose. But before I do, I want to give you a chance to respond. Is there anything that you want to say in response to what I've said so far?
I find it really interesting when you were talking about how a lot of people still need to know themselves and maybe their worth, and they're working on that. That has always been something that I've just known. I haven't felt the need to pull back layers so that I can feel more worthy. And in a lot of ways, I have tremendous gratitude for that because I see what a struggle it is for a lot of people. I think that's one of the reasons that I've been called to coach people, is because that comes to me naturally. And that can sometimes, it is a confidence, it's a self assuredness, but it also, you have to be grounded in it because it has to have humility. But what I found interesting about that is that my challenges often are around relationships. So I come with a knowing of self worth and a feeling of feeling worthy. What I'm challenged by is belonging. So I find
Hmm.
really interesting is that from a relationship standpoint, once I get in a group with other people, then as I've gotten to know myself, it's about acceptance, it's about belonging, and it's the relationships, the tugs on those relationships. And also because you talked about being emotional, I'm hyper attuned to when I get a sense that maybe I don't belong in the room, maybe I don't belong at the
Hmm.
boardroom table, maybe I'm not welcome in that environment. So I think that all makes really good sense to me, Grace.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I just real quick, this bottom square, there's a lot around see all that white? Like there's a ton of white around that bottom square. And there's a lot of things that you just said that we could talk a lot of length about more there. But I want to point out something since it relates to so many people. This one thing you mentioned that you haven't had that same struggle with self-worth. And I'm glad you said that because the flip side of that, the fact that you have that colored in means that you are very empowering, and that energy that
Mm.
you broadcast through that little, it's called your will center, is it makes people around you feel like they can do anything, and it makes them want to commit to whatever it is that you suggest. So it is really beneficial for you to have that configuration as a coach, because it helps people to feel empowered and to believe in themselves, especially when they're around you. But what you need to understand is that because that is something you're broadcasting, it's what we call a borrowed energy for them, meaning it's consistent for you, but their experience of it is really only going to be in relation to when they're in relationship with you or someone like you that has that configuration, because then it's what we call borrowed energy. But that borrowed energy usually only lasts in the moment, like as long as you and I are in the same room or Zoom room or working together. If we're in the workplace, then that's true. But when I'm by myself at home, I don't have access to that energy because it's borrowed. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yeah, that does. That does.
Yeah, so that can help you be a better coach, just knowing that that's something you bring, which is a superpower, but it's not something that's necessarily they're going to have consistent access to as soon as you leave. Like it goes away for them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Grace.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so, one other quick thing before we move into your story more, I want to show your grand purpose. So, yours is called the left angle cross of masks. And so, on our site, you can upgrade to get yours. It's only $7. But this gives you like the summary version of those four key codes, which in your case is 7, 13, 23, and 43. And what that means, Sarah, is that you're here to prepare yourself properly to offer practical leadership when the time comes. You will
Oh,
be
wow.
expected, I know, check this out. You will be expected to take power in crises, lead others, provide a practical solution, and save the situation, and then leave voluntarily when that happens. Isn't that amazing?
I seriously, I we did not plan this. And it's based on my birth date. So this is really wild. I'm writing this down as you talk because this is just, yeah, I'm blown away, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's what's so specific about human design as a way to know yourself in as compared to other systems. And I'm always all about whatever resonates with you, go with that. So I'm not hard pushing human design, but I will say that of all the things that I've looked into, and which is a lot, this is the most specific that I know about. Gosh, there's things I want to say about your chart that would illustrate that, but I want to make sure you have enough time to tell your story. So thank you for that. Thank you for validating that you are living on purpose, clearly. So I'm not making this up. You're not making this up. Now you know yet again, and in yet another way, that you are truly doing the work that you're here to do. And it's not just doing the work, but it's about being the person that you're here to be, which is that problem solver. It's building that layer of information that helps people feel safe, which is that public role one specialist. And there's so much more, providing shortcuts as an express builder. There's a lot more, but just for now, we'll just say that's a lot. And again, the purpose of that is to show who you are, and it introduces us as you tell your story. We can get more insights into why you have the story that you're about to tell, because literally your chart shows you, it's like the Cliff Notes version of your life's purpose. and not even just the cliff notes, but at a glance, it's the cliff notes. But if you study it in depth, as I've done mine for 7 years, like I always can find it in my chart. And there's a lot of stuff to study and there's a lot of information, but it's all there. And so what it does is it just indicates that when, and this is the key message for you listening, if when you're doing the work that you find satisfying or the work that you're here to be and do, and you can get that at what'smychart.com, your life is going to be so much more meaningful and purposeful and fun. My dad used to say, when you do the work you love, you'll never have to work you'll never have to work a day in your life, because what you love is what you're doing. And so you don't have to feel like it's work. It's not drudgery. And so I'm so grateful that you're doing the work you're here to being the work you're here to do, and you're being the person that you're meant to be, Sarah, as the founder for Coach for Success. And I can't wait for you to share more about how you came to live a fearless life. So before we jump into your story, I know I've said a lot. Is there anything else you want to say before we jump into that?
No, I think everything that you've said, I'm going to try as I tell my story to show how that threads through my life and how these various elements have shown up, sometimes multiple times. And I didn't know what they were trying to teach me, but I felt a very strong sense that there was something else for me. And that kept being a recurring theme in my life. And so I think that for your listeners, I think that's a story that I really want to share because I am in midlife now. And when we get to midlife, there's a natural point at which we start looking back and we start saying, I'm halfway through the show. Hopefully, I've got half my life left. Is this what I was meant to do? Is this the purpose that I was here to fulfill? And it becomes really important to us in a different way than it did earlier in our lives when we were trying to achieve certain things. Grace, I can explore more about that. But yeah, no, everything that you've just shared is really, really powerful. So did you want me
Awesome.
to
Yeah,
go
thank
on
you.
and
Yeah, no, thanks for validating that. Yeah, I'd love for you to share how you went from corporate to having your own thing. Like you mentioned that you always felt there was a purpose and you felt like you were meant for more. And I think that I know that a lot of people who are listening feel that as well, but they don't know how to take action on it. And maybe they're uncertain about reading the signs. And so as you were talking, like I was getting full body chills. And I realize now when I say that I didn't used to listen to my body. I didn't recognize, like I would, when I was about to do something really dumb, or I just did something really dumb, like my whole body would be like, ah, like I would feel it and I'd feel like sweat pouring down my armpits. And I'd just feel like, oh my gosh, something big just happened. But I was so scared by by what that meant. Like I just would freeze up. And so learning to listen to my body has been a journey for me, because this isn't about me, but I used to want to leave my body a lot. And so I just want to highlight, as you tell your story, like talk to those people who are listening, who are where you were, let's say 5 years ago, feeling the call, but not knowing what it means, not knowing how to read the signs, and maybe not yet tuned in to listening to their body, because that is a key sign to listen to your body. And then that your body will tell you more. So yeah, tell us more about how that story started for you, Sarah.
thank you, Grace. And I will say that the story, it goes back a lot further. And so I will tell the story and then we're going to fast forward to back to today. But I want to take you back in time to my early 20s. And in my early 20s, actually at that time, I had big dreams and big visions to be a performing artist. And that was really important to me. I was very artistic, always had been. I loved stage. I loved the way I felt when I was taking on the role of another character and assuming that those emotions and really connecting deeply. That dream, sadly, it died when I ended university because I assumed a limiting belief that would never amount to a job that would allow me to make money. And at that time in my life, I felt very insecure about money. And so scarcity and that scarcity mindset became something very powerful that was driving me to have a career that I could rely on. And it was also very important for me, Grace, to be an independent female. So my parents had raised me such that they wanted me to be educated. They wanted me to have my own career, my own money, and not rely on a marriage, for instance, in order to live my life. And so it became very important for me to have the financial means. That's when I entered PR and communications because there were so many things about it that I found fascinating, interesting. It got me on an intellectual level, and I loved the problem solving. I loved the challenges. I loved using words and building relationships and nurturing relationships with stakeholders. That was all very important. The work itself, what I didn't realize at the time was that the work itself was going to be emotionally and mentally exhausting. And because in a lot of ways, it just requires in this career people to be on 24/7. And now, especially people in PR and communications barely have a chance to disconnect from their cell phones or their laptops. There is a demand on humans that I didn't anticipate. And so it became more and more draining for me over the years. And I will share with you and your viewers that it took physical and mental burnout for me to realize that there was something in misalignment. So, the first instance of physical and mental burnout happened very early on in my career. And it was fairly simple. Like, I didn't get sick or anything, but it was more of I'm done with this. And I quit my job. And I very quickly went into freelance work and consulting. And I was like, this is my happy place. And I was creative, and my creative energy was flowing. And I loved how it made me feel. And then within a year or two, guess what happened? That scarcity came back, and I was like, ooh, I don't really like how this feels. I'm insecure about money. I was married, and my husband and I wanted to buy a house, but we couldn't get a mortgage because I didn't have a secure income. So it was inhibiting me from doing some of the things I wanted in life. So back I went into corporate work. This time, there was, again, lots of things I loved about it. The job I went back to, I was dealing with challenges and public relations issues and things that were really big. And it gave me a lot of purpose. That was also the time at which I first started dealing with actual crises. So we had a flooding emergency. I live in Canada, and so it had happened throughout our province of Alberta. And the company I worked for, I was the crisis communicator for that emergency. And that was really purposeful for me because my work helped people get out of harm's way. My work helped people feel safe and secure, and it helped them get through a very traumatic time for a lot of people. In some ways, it was calling on these skills that I had, and it really energized me to be helping others in a way that I could. And one of the unique things about my writing style is it's always been very empathetic. I'm very people centered. So I think that is very true of my former career and also now my career as a coach, is that it's always been about people and how do I help people. So as I went through that job, unfortunately, I experienced, for the first time in my life, I experienced actual mental illness. And that was really challenging because I had never experienced depression before. And it was debilitating depression. And it was a very difficult and dark time in my life. I just had my second child. I think I was probably dealing with some postpartum stuff there. But everything just seemed to be too much. There was overwhelm in my life. Being a new mom, having a big job in a corporate entity, and I was a manager and I had a team for the first time. I didn't have the supports to do it the way that I would have wanted to. Everything in my life became overwhelming. And what happened was my body literally went into shutdown mode. My body said, no, we can't do this. And I had to, again, I left that job and I said, that wasn't it. I don't know what's next, but I think I'm done with communications. And I took about 8 months off and I really just immersed myself in being a mom and getting myself healthy and getting myself back on track. And then I found my energy again and my purpose. And I was like, I want to be a consultant. This is what I'm here to do. So I went back into consulting a second time and loved it. loved helping people, help different organizations, different institutions, different problems, different challenges, super exciting work. Was really, really happy. And then one of my clients actually said to me, Sarah, we'd like you to come inside the organization. We'd like to give you the opportunity to come in and take a leadership role, a senior manager role. We think you'd be great at this. You'd get to continue what you've been doing for us as a consultant, and you'd have a team. And again, on the financial side, I was looking at my bank balance going, huh. And so, again, out of fear, I decided I'm going to go back to the corporate world. And this time I decided, no, I'm going to do it differently. I'm not going to do it in the same way that I have before, where I end up feeling overwhelmed and I end up not in a good place. And then I have to exit, have this emergency exit strategy. So I was there, Grace, and everything was going really well. And actually, my kids were thriving and family was good. And I had found a really nice balance. I was having purpose. I had a team. I was able to tap into that visionary leadership that you talked about earlier. I was leading issues and crises, and it was very purposeful. Then COVID hit. Then we had a pandemic, and my role exploded because all of a sudden I was in charge of managing crisis communications for an entire organization across Canada. And it had tremendous responsibility. And I stepped up. I stepped up with abundance, and I had the energy and I had the passion and the conviction for it. And what happened was, in that time frame of 18 months when I was leading crisis communications and a team of communications professionals, I did not take care of myself. I let my health go because I felt that what the organization needed was more important than my personal needs. And I figured that I could do what I'd always done, which was just push through a little harder, right? Work longer hours, stop taking lunch, not take breaks. And what happened, Grace, was that not only this time did my body start telling me through physical illness that it wasn't happy with me. And I had a number of things emerge for me, new medical issues that I'd never had before that had started to become chronic and debilitating. But all of a sudden, because I was taking such poor care of myself during that time period, I started to have mental and cognitive deficits in my prefrontal cortex that I'd never experienced before. Things like memory loss, things like vocabulary loss, things like vestibular migraines, which, if you don't know, is a thing where you get nauseous and dizzy just by moving because the migraine is so bad. And so all of these symptoms, I was sure, were related to the pressure that I was under, the stress that I was under. And so
Mhm.
I was trying to find ways to find that balance. Everybody was talking about work-life balance. Everybody was talking about the importance of taking time for mental health. I was trying to do that, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for my body.
Sarah, if I could just pause you right there, I really think you're sharing an important message, and I want to make sure that our listeners are hearing you. So when you were at a breaking point, you were getting physical symptoms. And I
Correct.
want to point out that the physical symptoms were your body's way of giving you like a red flag, like, hey, something's not right here. And so when and you did what most of us do when we're in that situation, and you tried to just push through it. And we use our coping skills
Mhm.
that we've learned from a lifetime of, I know I can do this, I can just push through it. But that is what got you here won't get you there. And because of the time that we're in now, we are increasingly being pushed to find new ways of living, working, and being. And so the old ways, which worked for you in the past, are not working anymore. We're not working for you. And this is what you were seeing. I just want to put words to that because that is our message. We need to know, love, and trust ourselves. And when we do that and we really take care of who we are, it's just the same as like putting the oxygen mask on
Yeah.
ourselves, like when we're on the plane. We cannot fill from an empty teapot. We cannot share from an empty teapot. So we have to make sure that our own pot is filled before we try to help other people. And so you're demonstrating that with your story. And gosh, there's so many things in your chart that I'm thinking about that I would love to, but I want to make sure you tell the story. And I want to make sure that people hear this, that when your body is giving out, because I've been there too, and I had debilitating migraines and so many things as well. So I echo your experience. And here's the key message that I want you to take away if you're listening and this is resonating with you. I want you to think about that health issue that you are dealing with right now and ask yourself, like in a moment of quiet, just at least close your eyes and ask your body, what is it that you want to tell me? And see what you get. You'd be surprised. Your body is probably trying to communicate something to you, and you probably know the answer, but you're afraid to hear it or you don't want to hear it. But that's what I found is that physical issues are often a way for the body to give us a message. And if we don't pay attention, it just gets louder.
Yeah, it
So
gets
yeah,
louder.
so fast forwarding to that part of your story, Sarah, what was the thing that finally kicked you over the edge to realize that you were in a personal crisis and that you needed to
Yeah.
make a different choice?
Yeah, no, great question, Grace. And I think that for your viewers and your listeners, it's really important, again, to realize that if you don't get the message the first time, it will come back louder a second and a third time. And ultimately, it comes back in physical ways, it comes back in mental ways, it comes back in emotional ways. But for me, the loudest message was coming from my body. And it was undeniable. I could no longer push it aside and say, I will be fine. I'll deal with my headaches tomorrow. No, they were debilitating. I could not get out of bed. And it was affecting everything in my life. And now I was in not just a health crisis that couldn't be fixed with taking pills because the pills weren't working. I'd been on all the medications and they weren't working. But now I'm ending up in the hospital and I've got these weird symptoms. I'm having like high blood pressure for the first time in my life, so bad, and they can't diagnose why, just out of the blue all of a sudden. And then I'm having a family crisis because now all of a sudden my family is seeing my stress and they're feeling my stress, and things are going sideways at home. My relationship with my husband is really struggling. My kids' mental health is struggling. Everything's seemingly going off the rails because I'm not well. And this then became an existential crisis for me because I was looking at my life and I literally woke up one day and I was like, I am not living the life that I'm meant to live. Life is not meant to feel like this. I should not be crying 9 times at work in a month. I should
Mhm.
not be dreading driving into the office. I should not be dreading having meetings with certain people and having to coax myself out of an anxiety attack before I walk into a meeting with a colleague. This is not normal. As I went through that process, I had to decouple myself from the identity that I had created of being a PR and communications professional and being a people leader. That was the crux because my ego wanted to hold on to my title of associate vice president. My ego wanted to hold on to my six-figure salary and my job security. And yet my life was crumbling. And so I had this existential crisis and I was like, I had to come to my values. What are my personal values? Because that was at the end of the day, that was the only thing that was going to guide me through this crisis. And there were two things that came to the top. One, I have to have my health. If I don't have my health, I don't have a good life. And two, I have to keep my family. Everything outside of that could go. And so for me, it was health and family. The third thing that was very close was authenticity. So, as I did my values, living authentically became very important to me. And so, it became important to me to start to speak my truth about what had happened. Why had this person who is seemingly so good in her job, she'd won awards during a time of crisis, now exiting the company and saying, see ya, I'm going to go off and be an entrepreneur and do my own thing? It was because I'd had this existential crisis where I had to reevaluate my life and my values. And I had to say, look, this environment might be great for a whole bunch of people, but it's not great for me. And I think, Grace, as you went through my reading, what really jumped out for me is there are certain skills that were absolutely perfect for that career and for that job. But there was other skills that I wasn't tapping into. And there was a life that was possible for me that was gentler and calmer, and it was more purposeful and more aligned. And I just didn't see it yet. So when I left my job, I literally left with nothing. I was like, I quit and I didn't know what was next, but I just knew in my heart, I was like, whatever I do next, it has to be aligned with me. So I went on a journey for a year. I went on what was for the first 4 months, it was like a sabbatical. And I just dove into learning. I registered in courses, I finished certificates, and then I allowed myself this permission to follow my intuition. And I know for a lot of people that sounds like a really nice but impractical idea, right? How do you just follow your intuition? Don't you have bills to pay? Yes, I did. I was 50% income earner of our household income. There were absolutely life pressures. I had to pay for my son's hockey. I had to pay for my daughter's dance. I had to pay for groceries. But I knew that if I wasn't well, if I wasn't doing the things that I was meant to do, that I truly believed, Grace, in my heart, I knew my life would be shortened. I knew that if I stayed
Wow.
on this particular path or timeline of my life, that my life would be shortened. And that gave me pause to say, I have to redefine who I am and how I'm living. And it's going to be hard and it's going to take lots of energy and it's going to take lots of thought. And I'm probably going to fail several times, but I have been called to be a consultant. I have been called to be a business owner. And I was driving today as I was preparing for our podcast. And I was like, this is the way I wanted to feel. I have freedom, I have flexibility, I have choice, right? And all of the things that I have to overcome are mini obstacles, right? But when you're truly living in alignment with something that really feels good in your heart, and when I work with clients, whether they're corporate organizations or they are individual coaching clients, what I really feel is a sense of connection to who I am and connection to my gifts. And that emotion, when you feel truly turned on and truly connected, I can't describe it. There is no other feeling in the world than knowing that you are living your purpose. And I'm okay with the fact that I left a 24-year career behind. I am okay with that. There was lots of learnings in that. Um, there are moments of sadness because I think you still go through grief and loss. Any human would look back with fond memories and they would look back at the colleagues and the relationships they had and the fun times. But I think we have to listen to our bodies more. And that's what this journey has taught me in this last year is that I am in midlife and I have to listen to what my body is telling me. And when it's sick and when it's ill, then something's wrong. Something is not
Absolutely.
calibrated correctly.
And so so I just wanted to pause and just point one quick thing out here. So you mentioned intuition and how that was a key part of you started to listen to your intuition. And what I
Mhm.
want everyone to see, this yellow triangle to the far left, everyone has it in their chart. And it's the center for both intuition and fears. And you can see if you see there's four colored bars coming off of that, what that means is you have four different types of intuition that you
Ah.
have consistent access to. But even if you had a chart that where this was completely white, it means you have access to all these different types of intuition. It's just that the ones that are colored in are consistent. They're ones you have consistent access to, and the other ones are inconsistent. And they're inconsistent based on other people that you're around. For instance, I have this gate 57, which is white for you, but when you're in my presence, in the same way that you make me feel empowered because of that green one that you have, I can help you tap into your knowing. Why do you don't know, but you just know that. And one of the types that you have, for instance, is this ability to see patterns, this 18, the one at the bottom. And it's what has helped you in your career to see the patterns of what the crisis is that's coming or whatever it is. And you have another one, that's 44, it's about being able to smell trouble. And so it's interesting. It's related to crisis, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I think that's an important message that you just shared about listening to your intuition. And that is not something that you and I were ever encouraged to do in corporate.
No.
right? Nobody goes around and says, listen to your intuition. No, they say, think about it. Does it make sense? Is it logical? But what is that? Anyway, but the main thing that one of the main things that human design teaches us is to listen to our bodies. So I just want to highlight and confirm that message that you're sharing, which is
Mhm.
that's exactly what human design says. Listen to your body, and you're meant to follow what your intuition says. And in your case, you're meant to make decisions. So your decision making strategy here is respond, then wait for clarity. And for you, that's about your emotions. And that's because this yellow one on the far right is colored in. And so that's your center for emotions. And so you are actually meant to make your decisions not based on your emotions when they're up here or down here or here, because it will be variable, right? Until that wave crashes and you get to clarity. And so that's important for you to know. And most people associate their how to make decisions with their intuition. So I just want to point out that you are correct in listening to your intuition, and that guidance is a superpower that we are not taught in corporate. But I applaud you and thank you for calling it out, because it is something that we all have access to. And that was my point in showing you, is that everyone has access to it. It's just that if it's not colored in, it's inconsistent access. And those are all different types of intuition. So most people have at least some types that are consistent for them, and then others that are. But anyway, that's important. And that's one of the examples of one of my key messages, which is it is time for new ways of living, working, and being. And so you and I, Sarah, coming from corporate, we have a certain way of seeing the world, and it's a structured way. It's interesting. I see that in your chart. But what got us here won't get us there. It won't. And so you and I are meant to be bridges to help people get from old ways of living, working, and being to new ways. And with your particular configuration in mind, it's through shortcuts. So you intuitively, again, using your intuition, you can know which steps to skip in order to get there. And that's how you relied on that in your crisis situations and your communications, to know which things that you need to focus on to make those communications
Absolutely.
pop.
And you
Yeah.
know
So,
what? In corporate, you would never say, I'm using my intuition on this decision, right? Because they
right.
like to see the data points, they like to know the
Exactly.
rationale. But you're absolutely right. I had to have very strong instincts, and my instincts never led me astray. Sometimes the overanalysis led me astray,
Yes.
because when I got
Yes.
into my head, I got into analysis paralysis, and then I
Yep.
couldn't make decisions. So I
Yeah.
always had to come back to, okay, what is going to feel the most right? I've got all this information, I've got all this research, but I had to feel into it. And that's when you were talking about making decisions with emotions. 100%.
Yes.
You can't make decisions at the height of the emotion, right? I'm
Right.
angry. That's a bad time to make a decision. Don't do it. Take 24 hours.
Yes.
But what you want to do, and this is, I would say, the subtle nuance that I'd like to share with people is
Uh-huh.
move toward the emotion you want to feel more of, right? If I
Yes.
want to feel calm and I want to feel at peace and I want to feel serenity, when and where do I feel that way? That is a sign for me that I want to move in that direction. In my
Mm,
corporate world, I was in freaking chaos 24/7. I
yeah.
felt frenetic. Nothing about that environment let me feel grounded. I literally
Mm.
felt like I was tumbling in a wave 24/7, and I was so overstimulated and so overwhelmed, and I was in survival mode. So every single decision I made was made from fight or flight,
Yeah.
right? And that was not a place for me to be, because fight or flight is
Absolutely.
not a place of strength.
Or for anybody,
No.
And so I feel like that's a great transition to talk about the work that you do with people. And I know that we're offering this energy workbook, and you have a master class as well for our listeners to audit where they're spending their time, understanding, uncovering why they feel so depleted. That's what you're talking about. You felt and that stress, that fight or flight, was leading to you to a place where life was no longer happy. And
Yep.
it should be. We have a birthright. All of us, we're meant to be fully supported, where life is meant to be enjoyable. But when you get to that place where life is not, and your body is giving you these messages with sickness and dis-ease, that is a clear sign. So if you're listening and you're going through that, consider these messages. Let it simmer a little bit and see how this message resonates with you. And if you're interested in learning more about Sarah and possibly working with her, get this energy workbook to find out why you're feeling so depleted. This can certainly give you some pointers. So, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit more about what people are going to find when they get this workbook and the masterclass that you're going to offer?
Absolutely, Grace. So for me, when I was going through all of this, I had to figure it out on my own. Why do I feel this way? Why am I so depleted? And what I learned was that I was depleted in four different energy areas. We often think about energy just as physical energy. And so when we're feeling depleted, we think I need to sleep. And oftentimes, yes, that is what the body needs, is it needs a timeout and it needs a reset. However, what I learned going through my own stuff was that there's also mental energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy. And when I talk about spiritual energy, I want to make it clear to your listeners that I'm talking about human spirit. So it doesn't matter if it's agnostic. So it has nothing to do with what you believe in terms of spirituality. It has to do with your human spirit and your purpose, and making sure that you're doing things that reinvigorate your own human spirit. And so this energy workbook allows people to do a self audit, because it was a way for me to bring awareness to the things that I was doing to get a sudden boost of energy. A good example would be I was drinking coffee all through the day to try and give myself energy. But that was actually a depleting factor. It was depleting my energy. And so the energy audit helps people to understand, what are you doing to boost and what are you doing to drain? And sometimes what you're doing is counterproductive. I've also put in there some things for people to think about, that these tips that we've heard, I don't know, you should exercise, right? How many of us have dismissed exercise and been like, I'm fine? I want people to understand is that exercise is more than just for your physical being. So for me, exercise became the key to the dopamine and the serotonin that I needed for emotional energy, so that I could go do things and actually have the momentum and have the motivation and the stamina. And so I'm not a fitness coach, but I will tell you that exercise has so much good stuff in there. And it has become now a part of my life that I will not let go of. And I don't care if you're doing yoga or you're doing running half marathons. It doesn't matter. The point is that we need to understand what this does for us. So, the energy audit and workbook is a great way for people to get started on something right now that they can do for themselves. My master class on this is going to be really about helping people to understand what this means for them. Because I think that a lot of people like me are experiencing high levels of burnout and depletion. They see that they have gifts. They feel that they have physical needs they need to meet in this world, and they feel stuck, right? I felt stuck. I didn't think I could give up my income to start again. Guess what? I survived, and you will too. And that's what I mean by living a fearless life, is we have to have courage to do bold things. And we have to be okay with some of those things failing and not having it be a reflection of failure of ourselves. It's not failure of ourselves, it's how we look at it. And what I really love to do, Grace, when I'm working with my clients, is help them break down those mental constructs that they've built, because those limitations only exist in our mind. So, one that I hear from clients all the time is, I don't have the money. I can't leave my job because I don't have the money. What that tells me about somebody is that they are not open to being creative right now. They're very caught in this focal view. And what we need to do is open them up to peripheral view so that they can start to see all the possibilities, right? What are the other things that you're not thinking of that could potentially be skills you could tap into, sources of revenue you could tap into? How do we get you thinking bigger? Because when you're stuck, you can't see the other possibilities. I believe, Grace, that when we do, this is empowering. And for me, I work with both genders, or I should say all genders. I'm very inclusive that way. And my primary clients are females who are mid career professionals and are feeling stuck, burned out, depleted. They can't do all the things anymore. They want to change tracks. They want to let go of some of the pressure, and they don't know how. These are my people because I lived this and you lived this too. And I think when you've been through this yourself, at least for me as a person, and it said it in my chart, I want to help people fast track that, right? What can
Absolutely.
I do to show you the shortcut so that you don't have to go through the pain? My pain was 25 years of pain, and it got worse and worse and more debilitating. I don't want anyone to go through that, right? It doesn't
Right.
mean that I did things wrong, but it does mean that people can go through things and have transition faster and get to greater alignment and better health. And they need coaches as guides to get through that.
Absolutely. So if you resonate with Sarah's message and you're interested in help, please reach out to her. Get her free energy workbook at kyr.life/energy workbook and learn more about how to get support. Thank you so much for being on the show, Sarah. It is such a pleasure. Together, we can positively impact 5 billion people by 2025 through frequency, through alignment, and through collaboration. Do you have any final words for our listeners?
I do. The one thought that I want to leave everyone with today is that the opposite of anxiety is excitement. Let's get excited.
Absolutely. Let's get excited. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah. Thanks for joining us. Sign up at knowyourselfrevolution.com for upcoming events and more information on how you can be part of the Know Yourself Revolution, helping you know, love, and trust yourself.